Welcome to week 2 of Arise. Pastor Amy did a wonderful job in introducing our Bible study centered on kings and kingdoms. Did you enjoy the lesson from last week? If you did, then you should remember the lesson about a certain king. Can anyone remember his name? Did you guess it? That's right. It is King Asa. We learned quite a bit about him last week. What are your thoughts on him so far? Do you think he's a good king? Does he honor and obey God? Let's take a look at what we learned last week to observe him. So, do you remember the 4 things that a good king must do? Number 1 was we learned they must seek the Lord. Number 2 was keep the law and commandment of God. Number 3 is get rid of anything that you might worship or put above God. And number 4 is build and prosper. So when you look at those things in our lesson so far, did King Asa do those things? Yeah, I think he did a pretty good job in following those guidelines. Well, today we're going to pick up in 2 Chronicles 16. So you should have your Bibles already, but if you don't, go ahead and grab them. Open up to 2 Chronicles 16 and let's get started in reading our lesson. It reads, in the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might permit no one to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. Then Asa took silver and gold from the treasures of the house of the Lord and the king's house and sent them to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying, there is a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I am sending to you silver and gold. Go, break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me. Okay. Let's just pause right here. We jumped into this story with a lot of action. Let's make sure that we are all following along. Right off the start, we're introduced to Baasha. Everyone say Baasha. Good job, guys. What do we know about him so far? Is he a king? Yes, he is king of Israel. Now, it's not too clear if he's a good king or a bad king. We don't know quite enough about him, but let's look for clue words. It says that he went up against Judah. Well, if Asa is a king of Judah, and we've already established that he is a good king, if Baasha is going against him, do you think that makes him a good king or a not so good king? Yeah, probably not so good. Baasha is building something to block the people of Judah in. He doesn't want to let anybody into Judah or anybody out of Judah. This way, he can try and control them. This cannot be good for the people of Judah. But wait, Asa has a plan. What does he do to try and stop him? It says that he went and took money from the temple and tried to set up an agreement with another king. This king's name was Ben-Hadad. Everyone say Ben-Hadad. Good job, guys. Ben-Hadad was king of Syria. So Baasha is trying to gain control of Judah. Asa is trying to stop him, so he goes to ask another king for help. So just to make it a little bit more clear for you, here is how things worked back in the day. One king would have a covenant with another king. Who can tell me what a covenant is? Okay, a covenant is a strong, solemn agreement between 2 parties. These kings would make a covenant, a promise, to help protect each other in case one of them ever needed help against another army. That is why Asa went to Ben-Hadad for help. He wanted to get Baasha to leave Judah alone, so he was trying to make a covenant with this other king. The problem is that Ben-Hadad already had an existing covenant with Baasha, and Asa was trying to convince him to break that covenant. That is why he took money that did not belong to him to try and convince Ben-Hadad. Are you with me here? Are you following along? Now, Asa has experience in protecting his army and his land before. Last week, you heard a story about how he and his army went up against a much larger army. And what did he do then? Did he go and try and bribe someone to make a covenant with him? No! He prayed and asked God to help him. But he is choosing to do things differently this time. Do you think this is a good plan or a bad plan? Now, I want you to get your follow along page that says what not to do. Let's look at number 1. It says, don't seek anyone else before. What do you think goes in the blank? What? I can't hear you. Don't seek anyone else before God. That is what Asa did not do in this case. And now we're going to have to read and see if that was a wise choice or not. Let's keep reading and pick up in verse 4. And Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, and they conquered Ion, Dan, Abel-maim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. And when Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah and let his work cease. Then King Asa took all of Judah, and they carried away the stone of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building, and with them he built a Geba and a Mizpah. Now, first of all, if I am mispronouncing any of these words, I am so sorry. But let's just look at this now. Did Asa's plan work? It sounds like it did, right? Ben-Hadad attacked Israel, and that made Baasha abandon his plan, so he had to go and try to protect his land. Then Asa took the material that Baasha was using to build his own projects. Sounds like a win-win situation, right? We will see. Let's keep reading. At that time, Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you relied on the king of Syria and did not rely on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you. Were not the Ethiopians and the Libyans a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen? Yet, because you relied on the Lord, he gave them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. You have done foolishly in this, for from now on you will have wars. Whoa! Even though Asa got the result he wanted, it sounds like he did not make the best choices in the process. He made all those plans relying on himself. Get your sheet of paper again and let's look at number 2. It says, don't make blank without blank help. What do you think goes in the blank? Think about it for a moment. Don't make plans without God's help. That's right. We need God, and we should be seeking him to make all of our plans. That is why he gave us the Holy Spirit as our helper. Now, last week we heard about a prophet named Azariah, who God sent to bring a message to Asa. This time God sent another prophet named Hanani, but their messages were completely different. Azariah brought a message of encouragement and hope, but Hanani brought a message of correction and rebuked Asa. I want all of you to focus on this verse. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. 2 Chronicles 16:9. Let's all say this verse together. I want you to say it loudly and clearly because this is our memory verse this week. It says, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. 2 Chronicles 16:9. Very good, guys. So this is so interesting. Last week in 2 Chronicles 14:2, we read that Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Now, in this verse, we read about the eyes of the Lord again, but this time it is reminding us that the Lord is always on the lookout for people who are seeking him and are committed to him. At one point, this described Asa perfectly, but then Asa lost focus and started seeking others first. That should never be what we do. We should always strive to seek the Lord first and foremost. I don't know, guys, but this cannot be good. Hanani is reminding Asa how his actions have not been in alignment with God's word. How do you think Asa is going to respond to this message? I don't know. Do you think he's going to be angry? Do you think he's going to say okay and change his ways? I don't know. Let's keep reading so we can find out. Let's pick up in verse 10. It says, then Asa was angry with the seer and put him in the stocks in prison, for he was in a rage with him because of this. And Asa inflicted cruelties upon some of the people at the same time. So, how did Asa respond to this message from Hanani? Not so well. He became angry. Let me see your angry face. That's right. He was so angry that he threw Hanani in prison. Not only that, but it says that he also brought pain to other people. This must be referring to other people who noticed that Asa's behavior was not bringing God honor. Maybe these people also brought it to his attention and tried to correct him. Either way, it made Asa very, very mad. Let me ask you guys something. How do you respond when someone corrects you? Sometimes when we are not careful, we can become filled with pride and respond in anger when someone speaks truth to us. Hanani did not say anything that was untrue, but Asa was not in the posture to receive wisdom and correction. Therefore, he allowed himself to become filled with resentment. This is something that we must be careful to not do because it can cause us to not hear from the Lord. Okay, get your sheets of paper again and look at number 3. It says, don't get blank when God blank you. Okay, what do you think goes in the blanks? What do you think it's talking about? I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Don't get, are you ready for the answer? Don't get angry when God corrects you. We should live our lives in a posture where we should be able to receive correction from the Lord and take it and apply it in our lives. That is how we grow in life. We can't get angry and make our ears deaf to him. That is never going to be a wise choice. Okay, now let's keep reading. It says, the acts of Asa from first to last are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa was diseased in his feet, and his disease became severe. Yet, even in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but sought help from physicians. and Asa slept with his fathers, dying in the 41st year of his reign. They buried him in the tomb that he had cut out for himself in the city of David. Wow! Did anyone see this coming? Asa ended up getting some disease in his feet, and that disease ended up being pretty serious. It was not something that a Band-Aid or some medicine could fix pretty easily. Do you think that Asa took this time to pray and ask the Lord to heal him? No. It says that he asked help from the doctors. Now, hear me out. There's nothing wrong in seeing a doctor for help. But sometimes we forget that we have the greatest physician of all available to help us. Who is the greatest physician? Say it with me. Jesus. That's right. It is not wrong to seek help from a doctor, but it is careless for us to not seek help from our helper. It would be careless for us to not pray and ask for healing from him. Asa's disease got really bad, and he never sought the Lord's help, and he ended up dying. That was the end of his reign and the end of his story. And that makes me so sad because he got off to such a great start. He was this amazing king, and he did everything right in the eyes of the Lord. And then somewhere along the way, he took his eyes off of the Lord and started doing things in his own strength. And he ended up going in the complete opposite direction. Okay, here's what I want us to do. Throughout this entire time, we have been learning about Asa. We have also been following a timeline of his life. I want us to look at this timeline in order to determine how his decisions affected his life. So I want us to grab our other worksheet that says the fall of King Asa. So let's go back to the beginning. When we first heard about Asa last week, we learned that during his first 10 years as king, there was rest. That means there were not any wars. It also says that during those 10 years, Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord. Remember how he took down false idols and he did everything right. They built and prospered and all was well. His obedience to the Lord resulted in peace and rest. And then they battled against the Ethiopians during his 10th year as king, even though they were largely outnumbered. How did Asa respond? He prayed and asked the Lord to help, and the Lord gave them victory. Yes, he did, because that's what the Lord does. And then it says they had rest again until his 35th year as king. That means they had rest for 25 years. Everyone say 25 years. 25 years. That is crazy. As a king, this is the best thing ever. He had only experienced one war and had been blessed with 25 years of peace. In our story from today, we learned that in the first indication of trouble in his 36th year as king, Asa did not respond by going to God. He immediately sought the help of another king. Did he have memory loss during those 25 years? Could it be that he got a little lazy and was not spending time in prayer and growing his relationship with God? That could be an explanation as to why his first response was to go to man for help instead of going to God for help. I know it sounds silly when we read it on paper, but if we are not careful, then me and you can do the very same thing and make the same mistake. We can go from having a very close and personal relationship with Jesus, and then we can get a little lazy. Maybe we stop spending time reading his word and seeking his presence. Maybe we start going to church, but we stop listening to the message. We allow ourselves to become filled and satisfied with things of the world, such as electronics and pretty toys and fancy devices. But all those things will only bring satisfaction that will only last for a moment. And then when trouble comes up, we will go to post it on social media to vent. Or we will look for another way to make us feel better, ways that are not from God and will only take us down a path of sin. Asa's 36th year started off with disobedience. He later dishonored the temple of God by stealing money that did not even belong to him. He then displaced his trust and put it in man instead of putting it in God. And then when Hanani tried to correct him, he was filled with denial. Then it says that in his 39th year of king, Asa had a disease. And then in his 41st year as king, he ended up facing death. Asa's kingdom went from 25 years of peace and rest to such a turn of event in 5 years. What was the difference? Where did he go wrong? Asa took his eyes off of God. He stopped seeking him. He put others before God, and he stopped trusting and obeying him. All those decisions led to destruction. Okay, here's where I want you to look at your paper and let's fill in the blanks and write down those order of events. You have a word bank down at the bottom to help you. I'm going to read that one more time, and I want to see if you can see what words go in the blanks. Okay, it says that Asa started off with disobedience. That means he did not obey God. And after that, he dishonored the temple by stealing money that did not belong to him. When we do not bring honor to God, that means we are dishonoring him. Then the third thing says he displaced his trust and put it in man instead of putting it in God. We have to make sure that we don't displace our trust and try to put it in other people when it belongs to God and only God. Then the fourth thing says, when Hanani tried to correct him, he was filled with denial. So sometimes we don't want to admit that we are wrong. We don't want to admit that we made a mistake, but denial will only lead us down the wrong path. Then the next thing says that he developed a disease. Now, Asa's disease was a physical disease. It was a disease in his foot. But sometimes we can have a disease in our spiritual heart, or we can have a disease emotionally, because it could be the result of not walking in obedience and in alignment with God's plans. Then it says he ended up facing death. Asa died. He died after making all these mistakes. And then the last thing says all of these decisions led to destruction. What could have gone down as an amazing king and kingdom ended up resulting in destruction. And that's exactly what happens when we take our eyes off of the Lord and put other people before him. Last semester in Arise, we learned about the narrow path and the wide path. Do you guys remember the verse that we learned? It is, enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Matthew 7:13 through 14. Asa got off to a great start, but that was because he was living his life honoring God. The moment he stopped, He started following the wide path, the one that seems to be filled with easy decisions and quick fixes. But look where it took him, to complete destruction. This is a great reminder how we cannot grow too comfortable or complacent. We must also not have deaf ears to correction. Asa could have gone down as one of the best kings in history. Instead, he allowed sin to overcome him and spent the last 3 years of his life inflicted with disease. We cannot only focus on how we start, but we must also be concerned how we finish. As we go through life, we must be sure to cling to this truth. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. 2 Chronicles 16:9. Say that with me one more time. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him. In other words, our choices do matter. Your choices matter. We cannot just flip a coin to decide what path to follow. Obedience in God will always help the Lord see us and help us in all circumstances. Disobedience destroys. Obedience honors. Let's do our best to always store this verse in our hearts and remember it. Thank you, guys. That is all for this week's lesson. We'll see you next week. Bye.